the playoff aspirations for next season. I wonder to which extent it would be based on where the team thinks that it's at realistically, like this is the team we've got and we're ready for this and that, and how much of it is also potentially a result of looking at other teams that have been fighting for a playoff spot and looking at your Pittsburghs, your Washingtons, your Philly, your Detroits, and say, well, there's no reason that we can at least be as good as those teams next year.
Yeah, I definitely think there's some. Well, listen, I mean, at one point, Suzuki said, had things gone differently this season, we easily could have been in a playoff spot considering the number that it's going to take to get in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about easily, but that came out of him. I didn't ask him that. Like that came from him. So it's clearly something that he's thought about, where they look at the Eastern Conference, the way it played out this season, and said, man, we really missed an opportunity here. I personally of the mind that, and this is actually an interesting thought exercise that I thought of when the Flyers were in town and they were getting pummeled by the Canadiens, and John Tortorella saying before the game, like, I hate that term, meaningful games. I hate it. We're here, we're playing those meaningful games. Let's win them. Let's get in the playoffs. The playoffs are the meaningful games is what he wanted to say. These aren't the meaningful games. We want to play these games so that we can get to the meaningful ones. And you watch that game and you watch the whole process that Philly's, and listen, Philly could still get in, but you watch this whole process, and if they don't get in and they wind up with a 15th overall pick for their trouble, and they kind of like, was it all worth it?
Yeah.
And maybe it was. It's not a clear answer. Like, maybe there is value to those kids going through this and understanding what it takes. Because the fact that Nick Suzuki says that the Canadiens could have easily made the playoffs considering the number, well, I don't know if he understands what a team like Philly was going through to get in. It's not easy. It's not, when you haven't done it, it's not easy. And Philly's learning that.
Yeah.
And the Canadiens don't know that yet. They might know it, but until you live it and go through something like Philly's going through, you won't know it. And that answer from Nick kind of made me think of that. Like, was it worth it for Philly? What value do meaningful games actually have? Like, all these teams, these rebuilding teams, Pierre Dorion said it in Ottawa, Kevin Adams said it in Buffalo. Like, we want to be playing meaningful games in March, and even this administration, Ken Hughes has mentioned that they want to be playing meaningful games in March, and Philly did that. What'd they get out of it? Probably something, and it's something that we can't touch and feel. It's not tangible. Like, but it's something.
You'll only see the result of that next season. You cannot, if they fail to make the playoffs and they end up with a 15 pick, it'll be easy to say it wasn't worth it because look, they're in Micah Blake McCurdy, the guy from Hockey Wiz. He says, how do you get he has a chart for that. The not the desperate state, but
it's the tragic standings.
The tragic standings were actually, So you don't make the playoffs, and you don't get a good a good draft ranking either. So you're stuck in no man's land. So it's easy to say, oh yeah, well, okay, if it was a waste, it was not worth it. But maybe that next season, the way that the Flyers would play, you would look at them and say, had they not gone through what they went through this season, they would not be able to play that way. So that remains to be seen. But I think that the Canadiens would be in a position, considering how their young players are developing, to think that they could be the next year's Flyers, the next year's, or even the next year's Canucks. It might be a push because they're about to clinch the Pacific Division, so it's not going to happen with Montreal in the Atlantic next year. But yeah, to make that sort of leap forward. But to me, I always come back to the fact that I'm okay with them making a big jump forward and, being done with the days of drafting high and resorting only to the hopes of someone that's not on your team already and just hoping for that miraculous prospect that you're going to draft. But if you are to make that jump, it's got to be followed by another jump, and it's just you're just continuing to progress. If that's where the team is next year, so be it. But if it means that the year after you'd go back a couple of steps again, to me that would be discouraging. So I'd rather see them take their time in order to climb the mountain progressively and be a very good team, instead of trying to do too much at once and then, things go south afterwards. I think I've made that point before, but I'm sticking to it. God damn.
Yeah. No, it's obviously the Canadiens' opponent over the next two days, Detroit, same situation, right? So it's, but what's obvious to me from Nick's comments is this is something that's been communicated to him. He was pretty confident talking about how next year the playoffs are the priority. And so, and I think that it's the way Nick feels about it, the way Cole feels about it is something that is of concern to management, and that they want them to feel like they've paid their dues and now they're going to get rewarded for it. How the Canadiens are going to go about it this offseason, I'm not quite sure, but there's definitely, and we've said it time and again, but I think this just reinforces that there's a sense that they feel the time is right to take a step and to make moves that are predicated on making that step. So,
but it's interesting because my impression was that their big moves, they would make them more in the summer of 25 than the summer of 24. But if that's really their mindset, that they're going to aim for the playoffs next season, it means that there will need to be some bold moves made in order to help this team, overcome that and get over that hurdle and reach that goal next season. Because it's the current state. I mean, the team's going to get better, but just the current lineup plus Kirby Dach, it's with one more year, it's a better team. But is it a playoff team? I'm not so sure. It'll need some outside help.
I mean, that's, but it's, again, if they can put them, I feel like they, I don't think Daniel Briere expected the Flyers to be in this position. I don't think Daniel Briere planned his offseason or even his trade deadline. I mean, he traded away Sean Walker at the trade deadline, right? Like it's so he, but he did acquire Eric Johnson. Like he did try to mitigate what he did at the deadline, because I think it was clear to him that even though this wasn't planned necessarily, that this is good. What's happening to my team at this stage of our build is good, and I need to help that. And I think that's all John Tortorella was saying, not only before playing Montreal, but he had a really impassioned explanation in Philadelphia to the local media about let's get in, like we're here. Let's seize, carpe diem, let's seize the day. This is we've created this situation. We've earned the right to be here and play these games and try to get in. Let's elevate and let's get there. So, I don't know what the tangible value of that is for them, but whatever it is, I think the Canadiens would like to have some of that coursing through their dressing room at this time next year.